Ciao. Very nice. Well, good to have you here, Triumph. Very good to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
So, I don't know. Didn't you think the Bradbury was named after Ray Bradbury? Sorry, Richard Gunther is here with us, everybody. Richard Gunther is here. He is the host of, what did we talk about yesterday? We talked about...
The Smart Home Show.
The Smart Home Show. Thank you very much. Throw another one at people.
All right, let's talk about Entertainment 2.0. That is a show where we talk about digital entertainment technology, how people are streaming, gaming, listening to music these days. Are you just doing different services there? Are you doing the different pieces of hardware? Are you actually talking about production notes? What are you doing? We're primarily talking about hardware and software. Again, it's consumer focused. It's kind of enthusiast oriented. So the odd origin of this particular podcast was that once upon a time, there was enough news about Microsoft's built into Windows DVR called Windows Media Center that every week we talked about what was new with Windows Media Center and available Windows Media Center plugins and development and stuff like that. And well, that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So we broadened our scope. Well, that's good. That's probably good that you did that. It reminds me, I need to officially cancel my Model T show. There you go. All right. So I was talking about the Bradbury building earlier, but it's probably better to talk about that tomorrow, excuse me, as I look down at what we're talking about. So tune in tomorrow to find out about the Bradbury building and the stuff that I learned about it. Not news to you is apparently the regulation stuff that's going on around big tech. Remind me, you're close to the DC area. Is that correct? Is that incorrect? Okay. I am. Is politics something that happens on the street in DC? Like, does everybody have an opinion about everything that's going on in Capitol Hill? Or is it a bit like LA where it's like, they make movies over there and I sell coffee, or they make movies over there and I sell insurance? I mean, the coffee thing's not really fair because I'm pretty sure everybody who works in a coffee shop wants to be in film. But I digress. Is it like things like the deregulation stuff, things like the competition rules that were announced last week? Is DC abuzz with Capitol Hill is going after tech? Is that area abuzz with that, or is it it's 8 o'clock and I got to make the donuts? I tend to believe that for the most part, the general populace that's caring about politics in the DC area is thinking there's more important stuff to be concerned about right now. Okay. I'm certainly well aware of it because I'm in tech, because I care about this stuff. Right. So this is something that I hear about just in the general news that I listen to and read. I'm not entirely convinced that if you stopped somebody on Constitution Avenue, they'd know what you're talking about. Check me on this, and I'm not, and when I say check me on this, I do mean it literally, because it's something that I'm always concerned about. Having done tech news off and on, mostly on, for the past, Jiminy Christmas, 23, 24 years now, I wonder sometimes if I get a little defensive / protective of the technology side. At the same time, I remember years and years ago when I worked in movie theaters, a theater would get a new manager and all of a sudden we're putting storage is in this place and, we're storing this other stuff here. And it was never because that was a better way to do it. It was because somebody would come in and say, this is something I can do. Because otherwise you're just telling people to sell tickets more or telling people to pop popcorn more, and it's boring, right? You want to feel like you're doing something. And so, by God, if I make it so that we're storing that there and that there, then I've really put my mark on this place until the next guy comes in. I can't help wondering sometimes if what's happening right now as far as different governments around the country going after tech, if it's because it's a thing they can actually affect, if it's because it's a thing they can actually do, because what they can't solve is homelessness, what they can't solve is poverty. What they can't solve is stupid, oftentimes, but they can, bend the titans of technology to their will. Can they, though? I'm far more cynical about this, I think. I
Really?
tend to think that this sells well. I tend to think that constituents like hearing that you are going to protect their interests from these big, bad companies. And whether or not you do it or not, you tried.
That's interesting. I see. I don't. That's really interesting. And we've gotten actually further away from what I originally wanted to talk about, which was specifically about sideloading. But, that's my fault because I led us that way. There are things I'm thinking about, like Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager out of the European Union or European Commission. I guess she's a member of the European Commission, which is the executive arm of the European Union. And I don't, completely understand it, but that's what I picked up. She is saying, and this reminded me so much of stuff that we heard around 2015 and earlier when a bunch of politicians were saying, you need to put a backdoor into encryption. And Apple said, well, we can't do that without weakening this for everybody. And politicians said, well, you'll figure it out. And, they sort of said, well, we have. And what we figured out is you can't do that without weakening it for everybody.
Yeah, and yet we're still getting that argument too.
Yeah, absolutely. But then Vestager came out the other day, last week sometime or week before last, I can't remember anymore. Came out and said, so they need to allow sideloading on the App Store. And then, somebody said, well, what about the argument that would make it less safe? Then she said, well, I'm sure they'll figure that out. And again, I'm thinking, well, they seem to think that they have. I'm curious where you are on the whole sideloading thing as far as iOS is concerned.
My thought on sideloading is if you want to sideload software, you have so many options and all of them run Android.
Okay. I thought you were saying for iOS you do. And I was like, well, you're talking about jailbreaking. But okay, please continue, sir.
Well, sure. Jailbreak. Is that still a thing? Do people still do that? I don't hear much about it like you used to.
You should read more iDownload blog. Because every now and then they're like, oh, here's this new thing you can do. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And they're like, yeah, if you run this jailbreak. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay. Thank you. Because I'm just not gonna. I mean, it's fine. I know there are probably a couple of people who do. I want to say Rob Walsh. I want to say he told me on a show that he still keeps one device jailbroken, but he barely uses it and he only does it for, testing purposes or something. I don't even know. Mm-hmm. Most people I know do not.
I really have no interest in doing that. And part of my lack of interest in doing that is that I know that I don't know enough to keep myself safe if I take control of the operating system on my phone. If I circumvent the security measures that Apple has spent so much time and money putting in place. That's why I'm on iOS.
Right.
If I wanted more control, I would use a platform like Android that allowed that. And I have Android devices. They're perfectly fine. I use them only for testing. They're not my primary drivers for anything. But it's just, I mean, I'd love to say, yeah, they're absolutely right. We should be allowing this just to kind of stir the pot. But I just kind of roll my eyes when I hear things like, you must allow site. What? Why?
The biggest problem that I have with it is it seems to... Apparently I wasn't smart enough to make a decision at some point. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, the whole thing is, and you hit on it, and that's what reminded me of it. The whole thing comes down to consumers should have choice. Well, they do. Consumers have a choice. They can buy any of a number of Android phones, or they can buy an iPhone. And if I don't want to say, well, if you didn't know better, you should have known better. But I mean, the iOS ecosystem, the App Store ecosystem has been a thing now for 2008 was when the App Store opened. So 13 years. But I think I actually heard it was 13 years either yesterday or today as we record this, that the App Store opened.
Wow.
So this has been the way this has been for 13 years. And initially, it was hosannas and hazannas because look how easy it's going to be to get our stuff onto the iPhone as far as developers are concerned.
Yep.
And now you have a number of people who are developing who were in high school when the App Store opened who say this isn't fair. And I'm not knocking them for being young when that happened, but I don't know. There are a number of things that, like, it's not like, well, it used to be worse, so now is good. But I mean, they've gotten Apple to move on things like going from the 30% to the 15% for people who make under $1 million on their apps. Google is actually better as far as that's concerned because they don't go back and change it, and you have to wait a year to find out if you made the million again and all that.
Right. But all that's market pressure. That hasn't been through regulation. That's worked the way it's supposed to work, through market pressure. I think this is like, I don't know, like the whoever oversees the laws that govern restaurants, maybe the health department or something, saying, no, you know what, you're going to be required to allow people to bring their own bottle of wine. I know that's not going to be on your wine list and you may not want that, but we're going to require you to let people bring their own wine to your restaurant. What right?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's the bigger thing that I don't know. I guess it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, maybe. When Spotify, comes and complains, or when Hey comes and complains, or when any number of developers come and complain, when Epic, I guess, when Fortnite comes and complains, I mean, they are loud. And if you get there first and you can say this isn't fair, then no matter how many other people come and say, well, I can see where they wouldn't feel like it was fair, but it might still be better. We'll figure it out.